Which pass catcher is the most important member of Auburn's offense?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's a Crain Kick Thursday. We're hanging out with Jake Crain of Crain Company. There's a lot of important members of this Auburn football roster, both on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. We're taking quarterback out of it because obviously Peyton Thorne is going to have a huge part of what this offense looks like in 2024. But outside of that, as far as the guys either blocking for him or throwing, or that he's throwing to, or he's handing the ball off to, you and I both believe that two particular pass catchers are going to be huge and really monumental if Auburn's going to have a successful offense in 2024, Jake.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, look, the best tility outside of fertility is versatility. We know that. And Auburn offensively, last year really didn't have that. Look, did Peyton Thorne play fantastic? No, but this is the ultimate team sport, and it's that way for a reason. So the more weapons you have, I'm a defensive guy, but offenses, and OCs always used to say, if we're even, we're leaving, which means that if, we feel like we got enough weapons where you can't double everybody, not only do we know what you're going to do, but even if you know what we're going to do, we're going to exploit it.
Yeah, and Auburn's closer to having those types of guys. They had Rivaldo Fairweather kind of come on towards the end of last season. They go out and get Robert Lewis through the portal. But to me, the name that I think changes everything in the passing game is Cam Coleman, to no surprise. Yes, he's a freshman, but we saw a glimpse of what he can be at A-Day. We've seen it kind of in these 15-minute viewing windows for the media over spring. Sure, he's a freshman, but we all know Cam Coleman is different. And if you have that true number one option, it opens everything else up, Jake.
Yeah, and again, Cam Coleman is different than anything that Auburn's had in a while. Because look, Auburn's had guys that have been looked good physically, right, sure, off the cuff, but they haven't produced. They haven't gone on the field and played the way they looked. We've had some guys that look like Tarzan and played like Jane. I'm just glad we finally got a guy that looks like Tarzan that can play like Tarzan. But when I look at it, Zach, I think Rivaldo Fairweather is the most important outside of the quarterback position skill player that Auburn has. Okay. And that's not saying that he's the best, but it's for multiple reasons. One, he's proven to be a problem, right? He was the one guy last year that Auburn had, whether you lined him up on the end of the line of scrimmage, whether you flexed him out, whether you put him on the outside, that body type wise, production wise, and his ability to move creates a matchup nightmare for defenses. It's almost like having that power forward in basketball that's 6'10", can shoot the three, and can post you up. He's fast enough to run by linebackers, and he's big enough to body safeties, nickels, and corners, even if they want to do something on third down. But the most important thing to me is he plays in the seam, right? And any defensive coaches out there, the first thing you got to protect is the seam. Yeah, you want to protect the outside, but when you have a guy that can create problems in the middle of the field, that's a much easier throw and a much easier read for a quarterback. Also, I think Rivaldo Fairweather in the red zone, outside of what I think Cam Coleman can do on the fade, right, sure, what he can do on the back shoulder, is Auburn's biggest threat for the reasons I just listed. But maybe the biggest thing that he gives you is a little bit of a cheat sheet for Auburn. Because teams are going to start off when it's passing downs or important downs where they think Auburn's going to throw the ball by bracketing Rivaldo Fairweather. Okay. Even if you're running two-man, which means you're too high, both your safeties are responsible for a half, but you can put nuances in there where you can double a guy on each side. Well, if I know that you have to double Rivaldo Fairweather, wherever I put him, that opens it up for guys like Robert Lewis, right? For other guys on the interior that can play the slot if you put them on the outside, or on the outside if you put them on the inside. And also, if you're running any coverage where you only have one bracket available, which happens a lot, that means that Cam Coleman is single covered. So I think we're going to get to a point where they say, well, do we either bracket Fairweather or Coleman, or do we bracket both? And if I know who you're bracketing, I know where the one-on-one matchups are. So to me, from just a physical standpoint, a route running and catching ability standpoint, a physical standpoint, being big and being able to move, I think Rivaldo Fairweather is the piece that puts all the other pieces in motion and gives Auburn a little bit of a cheat sheet on what teams are going to do against them.
Jake, the fact that we're having a conversation about hypotheticals of, okay, could opposing defenses potentially bracket two pass catchers, two options in Auburn's passing game? It's been a minute since we've been able to have that conversation. I'm trying to think. I guess
long minute, Zach. It's been a long minute. And listen,
Williams, that 2014 season, like
probably.
I'd rather have this tandem than that tandem. By the way,
I would as well. And listen, Cam Coleman's still got to go out there and do it, right? Rivaldo Fairweather's proven that he can do it, but I think Cam Coleman's about as safe as a bet as we've had. You know, we've had guys like Sammy Coates, who Sammy Coates was a hell of a player, but he was more of a straight line guy. He was more of a, I'm going to run the post, I'm going to run the vert. There wasn't a lot of time. They threw him the now screen. I mean, he super suplexed the guy from Texas A&M. But as far as a intermediate route running ability, we haven't had this combination and this size. Because again, at the end of the day, you're not going to have plays where guys are just running wide open a lot, right? You can't rely on coverage busts to hit big plays. Sometimes you're beat at birth. Cam Coleman just better than you, dog. Like, it's just part of it. So, 50-50 balls turn into 80-20 balls, and Auburn hasn't had that yet. And the guy that helps the most is Peyton Thorne. I don't have to go out there and be Drew Brees. I just got to put the ball around the net somewhere. And I know that even if he's covered, he's not covered.
I love the way that they've spent their attention this offseason with doing everything. Okay, the quarterback's not there. The quarterback didn't hit the portal where we thought it was worth it, and it made us a championship team. So what do? Let's make it as easy as possible to play quarterback. And to me, I think that was the right move for Freeze, but now all of the pressure is on Peyton Thorne because you've got guys like Rivaldo. You got guys like Cam Coleman. We haven't even mentioned Perry Thompson yet. I mean, they've made it better. They've made it better as far as, giving them options.
And yes, that was the right move if you didn't go get that new quarterback. And again, I hope Peyton Thorne takes that Jason Campbell jump, right? Yeah. But I'm not relying on it. It's not ideal where you're trying to do everything you can to hide your quarterback, right? You want it to be a mix of both. Hey, we got a hell of a player at quarterback. Let's go get some dudes around him to really supercharge this offense. Right. I don't think Auburn's going to be in this position a lot going forward under Hugh Freeze. But when you look at the context of what they had to do after not bringing in that new quarterback, this was the smart play.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. So Rivaldo Fairweather, Cam Coleman, both can definitely make the case for most important non-quarterback position on offense for the Tigers. What about the defense? Who is the most important defender on Auburn's team? We discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Jake, when you look at the defenders that Auburn's dealing with, my biggest concern on this team is pass rush. Yes, they've got big names and big personalities and big talents like Eugene Asante, like Keontae Scott. I'll put Kaylin in that conversation just because I think he's going to be a riser in the SEC this season. But if you can't rush the passer, none of it matters. It doesn't matter how good your coverage is. It doesn't matter how good your linebackers are at helping you stop the run. If you can't rush the passer consistently, you're not going to win games in the SEC. So to me, Jalen McLeod, Auburn's premier pass rusher, is the most important player, maybe even on the entire team, but definitely the defense.
Yeah, and he's a guy that if he stays healthy, and now that Auburn's added some depth, I think he's going to be able to empty the tank a little bit more. You kind of want those guys to kind of turn it into hockey, right? Where you go out there and you're able to just spill it all out because you got a guy coming behind you that can help. And that's a good pick, Zach. It's I don't think there's really a wrong answer when you're picking a pass rusher. But to me, I'll go back to what I said on offense. It's versatility. Yeah. And when I look at a guy like Eugene Asante, he's a guy that can rush the passer. He's a guy that can drop in coverage. He's a guy that's got a very high IQ. He's a leader on that defense. And he was one of the few guys that made the clutch plays. That you turn on the tape, and when Auburn needed a play and he was put in the position to make the play, he didn't, or he did it. He didn't run by the guy. He didn't really miss the tackle. We see the turnovers that he had. I mean, you go back to the A&M game and games like that. He's a guy that Auburn can put in multiple places that can do multiple things, and you can disguise him. He's a guy that when he walks up on the line of scrimmage, you have to account for him as a pass rusher, but he could drop back into a fire zone. He can drop back and be able to pick off a pass that a guy didn't think anybody was going to be there. But the leadership aspect of it, I think, may be the most important. Because when you have a lot of new personalities like Auburn does, and they were smart to go out and do what they did defensively, just like they were smart to do what they did offensively, you need different type of leaders, but you need that one guy that when he talks, everybody else shuts up and listens, not because he's screaming the loudest, but his play screams the loudest. So when I look at Asante, I think he's a guy that can keep everybody in line. He can put the defense in the right position, and he can do so many things. He's a Swiss Army knife. It gives DJ Durkin, it gives Charles Kelly and that defensive coaching staff the ability to really do a lot of different things with him and know, hey, if this guy's the focal point of what the offense is looking at, we can do things around him that may be able to backdoor somebody on the backside. You may be able to bring an exotic, show something, bluff, show something, bring it. That's where I think his highest value is. He's an everything guy. And again, it goes back to versatility. So it's just like any job. Even if you're a banker, the more things you can do well, the better chance you have to not only get the job, but excel in the job.
You got to think they feel better about their linebacker depth, especially with Durkin coming in. I mean, his track record with linebackers is pretty solid. Looking at what Asante did last year, he was asked to rush the passer 54 times, according to PFF. You think that number goes up this season?
I do, because I think a lot of times on third down when they want to bring the funk, he's going to be associated with it somehow, whether that's from depth, whether that's from walking up. And it's funny because on one hand you think, look, I feel like Auburn had to bring pressure and exotic pressures a decent amount last year because they had to. Like the perfect world for a defensive coordinator is, you know what? We're just going to rush for and play coverage in the back, because the more guys I bring, the less guys I have to cover. Now, that isn't to say you don't have a cheetah package where Asante lines up on the edge, right? And you bring in two defensive ends to play on the interior for a pass rush on 3rd and 11 and play two-man behind it. You got to stunt the front when you do that, because if the back rolls out, the Mike's got to take them, then there's nobody in the middle of the field and the quarterback can take off. So, it's a good question. I would say probably yes, but not just because he's blitzing, maybe because he's a part of a package where they want to bring in that extra DB and move him to defensive end in a cheetah package and let him go rush the passer.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be a huge part of what they do. And I think it'll also kind of allow them to play these other linebackers. I mean, Austin Keys played for Durkin at their previous stops, and then Dorian Mausi. I mean, Dorian Mausi, coming from Duke, he wasn't going to come here if he knew he wasn't going to get playing time. So I think he's going to have,
for sure.
I think he's going to have some sort of thing too. And then these young freshmen, I mean, we keep hearing how great, DeMarcus Riddick and DJ Barber are in today's transfer portal era. Like, how much time do you have to give to some of these underclassmen just to make sure that they're happy?
Well, you hope it's either one of two things. One, you have enough depth, which I think Auburn does, to be able to bring them along at a pace if they're not 100% ready. And it's not physically. Yeah. Those two guys, to me, look physically ready to play. It's the game speeds up a lot, especially when you play in that box, right? Eye discipline, my father, ran 4.75, but he was beating guys to the spot because he knew where they were going to be based on the action that he was seeing in front of him. So a lot of times it's the eye discipline and the ability to see it for these young guys, or they're so dadgum good, Zach, and they're so ready that you got to play them. So I think Auburn, again, this is what happens when you bring in talented players. I can tell you something. Georgia don't miss at linebacker, okay? Right. Kirby and them don't miss. The fact that's why, it wasn't we don't want him. It's considered a flip, even though he wasn't a take. DeMarcus Riddick was a take for Georgia. They wanted him. So to me, that speaks volumes, and that's what Kirby and that staff has earned. But, on the third wheel, if they aren't ready, you really just hope that you have the depth to be able to take time to develop guys, because it's just like being a teacher in a classroom. Every student learns at a different pace, right? But everybody's pretty much a visual learner. So the more you see it, the more you understand it. And at this level, the more you can see and the more you can slow it down for them in practice, because they don't have to hop right in the game and play, the better that will be for development, obviously.
Yeah. So I got Jalen McLeod as the most important defensive player. You've got Eugene Asante, definitely an easy case for both of those. Jake, how can people check out everything that you've got going on right now?
Yeah, man, it's really easy. Look, we're talking a ton of college football and NFL and everything. We go live 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Central. If you can't catch us live, it's on demand. We have a live chat. We take live calls now, which is always a lot of fun. We have people call in from all over the country and other countries as well. But Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, it's Crain Company, Crain and Company. If you like old school sports shows, I think you'll like this one.
Yeah, like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.